At a time when America idolized Elvis Presley, a young, audacious singer with fierce energy and a velvety voice, the darkest secret in music history lurked behind the scenes of this glittering empire. This secret had a name: Colonel Tom Parker. He was not a colonel, he was not Tom, and he wasn't even an American. He was Andreas Cornelis van Kijck, an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands, a masterful swindler who turned his protege into a global icon while remaining in the shadows, a puppeteer pulling the strings, terrified that the world would discover his true identity. His deception was layered, like the best carnival trick, and his final financial strike was the most cynical act of betrayal. Today, I will reveal some secrets that were buried for 50 years. What the Colonel did to Elvis shocked all of Hollywood. Section 1. The final blow: selling the king's soul for debts. The true scale of Colonel Tom Parker's financial fraud only became apparent years later, but his most devastating act took place in 1973, when Elvis was already drowning in despair and addiction, exhausted by years of endless Las Vegas performances. This year was one of triumph. The Aloha from Hawaii concert became the first satellite broadcast viewed by over 1 billion people. But it was also the year Parker decided to zero out the king. The Colonel, submerged in colossal gambling debts to Las Vegas casinos, many of which had ties to organized crime, urgently needed an influx of cash. And he knew where to get it: from his king. He secretly negotiated with RCA Records, selling Elvis's entire back catalog, recordings created between 1956 and 1972, including hits like Heartbreak Hotel, Jailhouse Rock, and Suspicious Minds. RCA paid $5.4 million for these rights. This action was not merely poor management. It was an economic crime against his own client. Instead of continuing to receive millions in royalties for decades, Elvis received a single lump sum payment. Worse, Parker, according to their outrageous contract, took half, $2.7 million. Elvis, financially illiterate and completely trusting or intimidated by his manager, did not realize that Parker had just sold his musical legacy forever for a pittance. For Parker, it was a brilliant deal that allowed him to cover his debts and maintain his lavish lifestyle. For Elvis, it was the final nail in his financial coffin. This sale of the back catalog was the quintessence of Parker's fraud, using his genius protege as an ATM, even at the cost of his future financial security, all for the sake of his own vices. Write your thoughts in the comments. Section 2. The birth of the Colonel and the death of Andreas. Andreas Cornelis van Kijck was born in the Netherlands in 1909, but his youth was shrouded in a dark stain. After possible involvement in a murder, the circumstances are still unproven, but suspicion always followed him. In his hometown, Andreas secretly fled the country. Approximately in 1929, he illegally, likely as a stowaway on a ship, arrived in the United States, where he invented a new identity: Tom Parker. Prior to meeting Elvis, his life was a carnival show where he honed the art of deception as a barker and promoter. In 1948, he received the honorary, but meaningless, title of Colonel, which he used to project a false solidity. The secret of his illegal status and possible criminal past became his most powerful tool for absolute control. This Colonel served only one deity: money, using his deception as a weapon. Section 3. The deal with the devil, the soul-splitting contract. When Colonel Tom Parker first saw the young Elvis Presley in 1955, he didn't just find a talented singer. He found the perfect gold mine. At that time, Parker was already a seasoned carnival promoter who had successfully worked with country stars. But Elvis was different, a raw, undiluted force embodying the bold, electric future of America. He was the personification of the forbidden, capable of tearing down cultural walls, and Parker immediately realized he could monetize this chaos. In 1956, he lured Elvis into signing an exclusive contract that became the most cynical financial maneuver in music history. While the standard commission for managers hovered between 10 to 15%, Parker unapologetically raised his share to an unprecedented 50%. This agreement was not a management contract. It was a soul-splitting contract that legally made Parker the de facto co-owner of Elvis's career and personal life. The king only received money after half of it disappeared into the colonel's pocket. Having secured financial control, Parker immediately began dictating the strategy. He sold Elvis's contract to the major label RCA Records and secured his national television breakthroughs, turning him into a global superstar. But the price of fame was complete subordination. Parker immediately eliminated all uncontrolled elements from Elvis's career. Instead of risky but creatively rich concert tours, he redirected his energy into controlled, assembly line Hollywood films. From 1957 to 1969, Elvis starred in nearly 30 pictures, most of which were low-quality musicals with predictable plots. This was not creativity, but calculation. The films guaranteed quick and assured profits that were easy to account for and divide in half. Parker made Elvis the king, but in the process turned him into a prisoner of his own throne, locked in the golden cage of Hollywood, cut off from the real music world and the international stage. Every film, every single only strengthened the colonel's control, transforming a genius into a manageable, highly profitable puppet. It was a strategy brilliant in its deceit, aimed at one goal: to ensure that the flow of 50% of his earnings never stopped, regardless of Elvis's creative ambitions. Section 4. The Golden Cage: Why Elvis Never Left the U.S. Here we come to the most critical and dreadful detail of the colonel's fraud: his immigration status. Parker, as an illegal immigrant, could not obtain a U.S. passport and could not leave the U.S. without risking detention, deportation, and prosecution for fraud and immigration violations. This was the main, though hidden, reason why Elvis Presley, the most famous person in the world, never performed outside North America, despite his immense global popularity. Parker ingeniously turned this personal fear into a management strategy, blackmailing Elvis into accepting his vision. This safety argument: Parker convinced Elvis that international tours were chaos, dangerous, and too many taxes. He argued that the best way to earn the maximum was through controlled residencies in Las Vegas and filming in Hollywood. The control argument. In reality, this allowed Parker to maintain total control over every dollar and every move Elvis made, without stepping outside the protection of U.S. borders. The hidden blackmail. When Elvis, especially in the 70s, begged for international tours, Parker resorted to intimidation, hinting at problems that might arise if he started questioning his decisions. Elvis, whose fate and career were so completely in the colonel's hands that he didn't know how to act independently, simply complied. Parker did not fear that Elvis would not be allowed back. He feared that he himself would not be allowed back, and his fraud would be exposed, leaving him without his fortune and without his king. His fear of being exposed as Andreas Van Keege cost the world the king's international performances. Section 5. Debt slavery in Las Vegas. Building on the financial blow described in Section 1 and the absolute power established in Section 3, Colonel Tom Parker became the greatest threat to Elvis Presley. The main reason for this was Parker's own uncontrolled vice, a pathological passion for gambling. For Parker, the Las Vegas gaming tables were not just entertainment. They were a financial abyss that devoured millions. In the 1960s and 1970s, when Parker was actively gambling, many major desert casinos, such as the ones where he spent most of his time, were deeply connected to organized crime. Debts to these establishments were not just financial obligations to a bank. They were debts to the mafia, demanding immediate and unquestioning settlement. When the colonel's gambling debts reached astronomical proportions, the ruthless creditors began to pressure him. They demanded payment. Since Parker did not have millions in cash, he had only one asset worth more than any debt: Elvis Presley. Their demand was simple and brutal: give us the king. It was this criminal pressure, not Elvis's desire, that forced the colonel to enter into a fatal agreement. In 1969, he negotiated an exclusive residency for Elvis with the owners of the International Hotel, later the Las Vegas Hilton. The contract was exclusively beneficial to the casino. They got the world's biggest star on exclusive terms, guaranteeing themselves a constant stream of customers and millions in profits, which helped pay off the Colonel's debts and secure his future credit at the gambling tables. For Elvis, this was the beginning of debt slavery. The performance schedule was inhuman. Twice a night, 7 days a week, for monthly periods that repeated every year. This conveyor belt, trapped in the stuffy halls of Las Vegas, destroyed him creatively. The king, whom the world dreamed of seeing in stadiums across Europe or Asia, was forced to sing the same songs for the same casino patrons who came to eat and drink, not for art. He was obligated to go on stage, regardless of his health or state of mind. This relentless schedule became the direct catalyst for his physical and mental decline. To keep his exhausted body and tormented soul going, a wall of doctors grew up around Elvis who, at the demand of his entourage and to keep the show running, uncontrollably prescribed him powerful drugs. This became the tragic road to addiction and his premature death. Colonel Parker sold his only client and his creative life to save his own skin from mafia debts. He used a contract that outwardly looked lucrative as an instrument of torture that effectively destroyed Elvis on a stage from which there was no escape, because the Colonel, who needed to keep gambling, was always waiting backstage. Section 6. Tragedy and Postscript. The death of Elvis Presley on August 16, 1977, came as a shock to the world, but not to those who saw his decline up close. Even after the death of his king, Colonel Parker did not let go of him. He organized the funeral, where he was seen wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a baseball cap, showing a complete lack of respect. He quickly arranged a sale of Elvis souvenirs, taking his cut. He could not even attend the funeral in Memphis, because he feared that by leaving Nevada, he might fall under the jurisdiction of another state where his immigration status could be revealed. It wasn't until after Elvis's death that his family and lawyers began to unravel the financial web. In 1980, a lawsuit filed against Parker led to an investigation that confirmed the Colonel had not acted in Elvis's best interests. Judge Blanche Davis deemed Parker's contracts unethical and conflicting of interest. It was officially recognized that he had inflated his commission and engaged in financial fraud. Parker's true identity, Andreas Van Keijck, was finally exposed. It turned out that the man who managed America's biggest star was an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands, whose fear of deportation changed the course of pop culture history and likely cost his client his life. Colonel Tom Parker died in 1997, going down as one of the most famous and deceitful managers in history. He was not a soldier, he was not an American, but he was a masterful swindler who built an empire on fear, dependency, and betrayal, leaving behind the legend of a king who could never escape his golden cage. Subscribe to the channel. There will be even more interesting secrets to follow.